What is up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy Fellow Show. My name's Kyle. This is going to be the second video in my 32 team projection series. I covered the Buffalo Bills yesterday. I'm probably going to link it somewhere, in one of the videos at the end or something. But either way, Miami Dolphins today. Super excited to talk to you guys about the Dolphins. We'll be talking about the Patriots next, and then the New York Jets to finish up the AFC East. We'll move on to another division. But yeah, I've been doing projections for about 7 years now, and I think this is my 8th year actually doing it. So we've got a lot of data, and I'll show you guys. Open up my spreadsheets, and we'll go over everything that I have to offer. But I do want to just get some housekeeping out of the way. I'm sharing with you guys my preliminary projections. I'm going to be updating and tinkering these throughout the rest of the summer. And if you guys want to see more, I do have a membership going on right now, fantasyfellowship.com. You guys can click on the member page and I'll show you what you can get. You got access to the Discord here. There's a link there. And then I have my projections cheat sheet out right now. I have an advanced data study, which I'm going to try and do a video maybe this weekend on that. But I looked at a bunch of cool stuff from last year in terms of advanced data, looking at all your quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, and tight ends. So I offer projections, rankings, data studies. You guys can get everything here. There's dynasty rankings, there's rookie rankings. I got my best ball exposures, my best ball rankings, ADP change, and more. There's going to be so much more going on through the rest of the summer, but $10 a month, or you guys can get a longer membership. But Miami Dolphins, let's get right into it. This is what my cheat sheet looks, or this is what my Google Sheets looks like. We're going to go to the Miami tab. And let's just kind of recap what happened with the Dolphins last year. This is the third season. We're entering the third season of Mike McDaniel and Smith, the offensive coordinator here. Tua Tagovailoa threw at a 69, or last year he threw at a 69.29% clip. Pretty high. He only missed a few snaps here as Mike White only had to throw 6 attempts. So this was mostly a Tua season, which was nice. But then you have about almost 4,700 yards, 8.3 yards per attempt, 30 touchdowns, 15 interceptions. 14 of those were Tua's. And then we saw from year over to year, the passing attempts came down in the second year. The rushing attempts spiked way up, but they threw for the same amount of touchdowns and interceptions in back-to-back years. So we know there's a lot of touchdowns here in this offense. Last year, though, again, they spiked as a rushing team. They ran over 66 more rushing attempts as a team. A lot more yards, 5.06 yards per carry, 27 touchdowns, 10 fumbles. That's a lot of fumbles. But 27 touchdowns, up from 12 the year before. So huge spike in, touchdown and red zone efficiency there. And then these are just kind of the receiving numbers. So huge year for the Dolphins last year. They went over 7,000 total yards. It only equated to 2 more wins, but pretty impressive offensive season from the Dolphins last year. And if you look at the numbers real quick, like Tua stayed healthy the whole year. 69% completion percentage, 4,600 passing yards, really great yards per attempt, 29 touchdowns to 14 interceptions. Threw a little bit more interceptions. I think that's a career high for him than we're accustomed to. And we know Tua doesn't run the ball very much, if at all. That's one of the things that holds him back for fantasy. And he did have 5 fumbles on his own, which kind of looks like an outlier. But that's kind of the overview of what happened last year. And my process kind of begins with, okay, how many passing attempts do I think this team's going to have? How many rushing attempts do I think they're going to have? And I kind of start with the total play count and kind of work backwards from there. So, over the last 2 seasons, I kind of, it's nice to have a continuity, the same coach, same offensive coordinator. I kind of know what to expect and I kind of play within those guidelines and see what I can do. I've actually got the Dolphins turned up to have more plays passing and more plays rushing than last year. So I have them improving as an offense yet. So what does that do for Tua? I got Tua. This is his, that right here is his last year's numbers. So I have his completion percentage coming down a little bit. I have him, missing maybe a game and a half, maybe a full game here as Mike White, 25 passing attempts. I don't like to project players for a full season. You like to leave a little bit of wiggle room there. But either way, about 67.5 completion percentage, 4,400 passing yards, 28 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. So I see him improving on that number a little bit. And then the rushing numbers, I actually gave him a couple rushing touchdowns and only 1 fumble this year. He's gone 2 years in a row though without a rushing touchdown. But before that, he did have 3 in his sophomore year and looks like 3 in his rookie year. So maybe he gets into the rushing column a little bit. I think it's looking good for Tua. They improved the offense. They have Mostert and Achane coming back. You got Jaylen Wright, who they added in the draft. You have Tyreek Hill, Jaylen Waddle coming back. They also added some nice young receivers. Braxton Berrios is still there, but Malik Washington, Taj Washington, I like both Washingtons. And then adding Jonnu Smith, that's an upgrade at the tight end spot here. So not huge upgrades across the board, but enough to make me be like, okay, they didn't get worse. So I think there's a slight uptick there. But overall, Tua, I think we're kind of locked into these last 2 seasons, man. He's been just a really, really good, efficient quarterback. And he grew year over year. His first year in that system, he did fine. He threw a lot of touchdowns. He's got a really good touchdown percentage here. So I kind of see him just continuing to do what he does as long as Tyreek and Jaylen Waddle are healthy. And hey, shout out to Jaylen Waddle. Congrats on the huge contract extension. But I think, unfortunately, for fantasy, it's the rushing volume that really limits Tua. He's one of the only guys near the top 12 that don't run. You can see Jared Goff doesn't run either, but I have him as QB 13. He looks great as a QB2 in Superflex leagues, but otherwise, he's going to be matchup dependent. Based on where he's at. Is he if he's on the road, is he in a dome? If he's out in the cold, if he's in bad weather, that kind of stuff here. But I think Tua, fringe QB1 this season, no problems with where he's being drafted right now. He's actually a pretty nice value in best ball leagues. But we'll move on. Let's talk about the running backs here, and this is where the offense spiked last year. You got Raheem Mostert. These are my projections right now. But last year, Raheem Mostert, 209 carries, 1,012 yards, 18 rushing touchdowns. That's insane. He also added 25 catches for 32 targets, 175 yards through the air, and 3 touchdowns. So 21 total touchdowns. And then they weren't done. Achane comes in, the kind of rookie that took us by surprise. 103 attempts, 800 yards, 7.7 yards per carry for Achane, 8 touchdowns. He also was a really good receiving back, 27 receptions on 37 targets, almost 200 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns as well. Now, these guys played so well that they didn't really need to see what Jeff Wilson, Chris Brooks, or Salvon Ahmed could do. They really didn't use these guys as much. They combined for about 80 carries. So I see this continuing to be Mostert and Achane as the 1A, 1B. And then I think we're going to see the rookie Jaylen Wright kind of get mixed in for that 80 or so carries that these 3 guys combined for last year. And they don't really give the ball to Alec Ingold. I count him as a running back, but he's more of a receiving tight end, fullback kind of move. But either way, Mostert, getting older, I see his efficiency going down a little bit. I have him down at 8 touchdowns from 18. His carries at 180, down about 30 carries from last year. We had 209. Still going to be a useful player. And I'm just, maybe he's a guy that really helps your roster out early in the year. I'm hesitant if I want to burn a pick on a guy that I don't know if he's going to be healthy by the end of the year. If he does stay healthy, though, he's going to be a huge smash. If he goes over 200 rushing attempts, he's been a hit. He's probably a fringe RB1, collecting more touchdowns. So I'm not going to doubt Raheem Mostert, but I do want to pour a little bit of caution into his outlook for this year. Still going to be very efficient, but I think a lot of his numbers also came too because Achane got hurt. Like, Achane missed a good amount of time last year. I was just looking at his game logs earlier today. He misses week 6, 7, 8, and 9. He came back for week 10, missed week 12. So he ended up missing 5 games in the middle of the year. But what's weird is, like, he had games where, 10 carries, 14, 17, 11, 18, but a handful of games below 10 carries. So not sure if that's going to be the case in 2024, knowing how good and electric he is as a playmaker. So I'm kind of banking on him playing 13, 14 games and getting those 10, 12 carries per game. I also see him getting, 3, 4 targets or catches per game as well. So this is a projection where, I could see Achane getting even more work, but as long as Mostert's healthy, they're going to continue to keep these guys fresh because these guys are trying to win a Super Bowl. They got to make sure both guys are healthy come December and January. So I have Achane going for about 150 rushing attempts, which is up about 50 from last year. His efficiency is going to come down. I mean, he ran for over 7.5 yards per carry last year. I have him at 5.83. I have him at 10 touchdowns, though, leading the team in rushing touchdowns. And I also have him kind of stepping forward as the lead passing down back. I loved seeing how much he lined up in the slot last year. That really popped out to me. I'm going to give you guys a quick little, I think it's in here. Actually, let me go to my 2023 advanced data. Just a quick little nugget here for you guys. I'm trying to open up my database here, and this is going to be that the advanced data set that I looked at last year, or that I mentioned earlier. Now I'm going to go ahead and find slot routes here for running back, and most of these are receiver on this side, so we got to go to the second column. But what stuck out to me was the Dolphins really like to use their guys in the slot. So Bijan Robinson was the first running back with 93 slot routes, which is pretty solid. He did run 420 routes, but 93 of them were from the slot. Christian McCaffrey had 89. Devon Achane was next with 63 slot routes, and his percentage of slot routes was really impressive. Like we're talking almost 33% of his slot route or percent of his routes were from the slot. And then they also used Raheem Mostert a lot. So Miami likes to move their guys out to the slot. I think Achane is going to be a beast there, man. So I like where Achane goes. I think he's a really solid third-round pick right now. Jaylen Wright, I was very, very excited about him coming out of Tennessee because he popped in a lot of the advanced metrics that I like to look at. But man, he's really not going to be able to get much of a chance to be on field as long as Mostert and Achane. As long as both those guys are healthy, we're going to see Jaylen Wright probably as the third running back, on the bench, active for game day. So if anything does happen to Mostert or Achane, though, we're going to be calling Jaylen Wright off the waiver wire. He's the stash probably at the end of your drafts if you want to hold on to him. Hamstrings are tight in September, so we'll see if Wright can get on the field because he's a home run hitter. His speed, his size, his burst, and his elusiveness are pretty fun to watch. So I like this running back field. If I'm investing in Miami, I'm fine with Achane in third. I think Mostert in the 8th round, 9th round, as especially if you need a running back 2 at that range, I think that's fine value. Basically, just need to stay healthy. So that's enough on the running backs. Let's move on to the wide receivers. Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle are going to be the bulk of this receiving duo. I do want to note I'm excited to watch training camp and see who wins the slot position, because is it Berrios? Is it Malik Washington? Is it Taj Washington? I don't think it's River Craycraft, but we'll see. Wide receiver 3 up for grabs. But last year, Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle, they were the only thing in town. They combined for 275 targets. The rest of the receivers only got 96. So there's some room to go around for the wide receiver 3 position if someone should stick there. But all this work is going to Tyreek and Jaylen Waddle. Tyreek's another year older. He's getting, to the point where we probably should expect a downturn in his stats at some point. So I did decrease his targets by a little bit. He had 171 last year. I got him at 165. I also have his receptions down to 110. That was 119 last year. And I have him down about a yard less per reception. He was at 1,800 yards last year. 1545 for me, and then I have him at 10 touchdowns. So I'm kind of like baking in a soft Tyreek Hill projection. It's kind of like a median outlier, I think, projection for him. But as long as he's healthy and he plays 14, 15, 16 games, like Tyreek Hill's probably going to be a wide receiver 1 a lot of weeks. So continue to draft Tyreek Hill. I think he's up there with CeeDee Lamb. I personally trust CeeDee Lamb to be healthier for the full season. We've seen him play healthy his whole career. I think CeeDee Lamb's wide receiver 1 for me. And then after that, sure, you could argue Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, one of those guys as the second or third receiver off the board. But Jaylen Waddle had a really okay year, just an okay year last year. 72 receptions, 104 targets, just over 1,000 yards and 4 touchdowns. I think and they paid him a lot of money, not just a few days ago, but I think we're going to start to see the shift of Waddle becoming more and more of a playmaker in this offense. They've been leaning on Tyreek Hill a lot, but man, I think just, Waddle entering his prime, Tyreek Hill soon to be leaving his prime. That's kind of where I'm playing this. So I've been drafting a ton of more Waddle in the 3rd round than I've been drafting Tyreek Hill in the top 3. I think Waddle is set up for maybe career highs in yards, maybe in touchdowns. Now, Waddle he had a ton of yards in 2022, 1,356. He was a deep ball kind of guy there. And then his rookie year, 1,000. So I don't know if he's going to touch 104 receptions. Probably not. Probably somewhere in the 80s. And who knows, man, if he's got the deep ball and he's covering the middle of the field, maybe he could, go over 1,400 yards. But for now, I like Jaylen Waddle quite a bit this year. One of my favorite buys on this Miami offense. If you can't get Achane, go get Waddle in the 3rd round. They're kind of in that same range. Other receivers here, again, like I'm not really. There's not going to be a third receiver that's fantasy relevant on this team as long as Tyreek and Waddle are healthy. But keep an eye on the Washingtons, Malik and Taj. I like both those guys at school. The tight end room got a little bit of an upgrade here. They, of course, had Durham Smythe last year. He had 43 targets. He caught 35 of those passes for 366 yards, just no touchdowns. Like he's like a fine, like he's a really like any team would love him as their backup tight end. I think like he's just a really solid player there. But I think we're going to see some more production out of the tight end room this year. You got Jonnu Smith here from Atlanta. 40 receptions for me, 65 targets, 465 yards, and 3 touchdowns. It's not too long ago Mike Gesicki was in town. And Tua did throw 6 touchdowns to these guys back in 2022. There's a lot of room here for a tight end. I mean, they had 72 targets to the tight end back in 2022. Last year it was a down year. They only had 52. But again, I think they're going to see the ball spread around a little bit more this year. I have 85 total tight end targets, and I just think Jonnu Smith, in best ball, he's a good tight end 2, tight end 3 option. And who knows, he's probably a guy that's going to be called upon at the waiver wire at some point here. We know he's an athletic and pretty solid tight end. And I think he's going to be a sneaky option because defenses have to account for Tyreek. They have to account for Waddle. You got to account for whatever running back they put in the backfield here. So Jonnu Smith's going to get a lot of soft matchups. So overall, the Dolphins, man, I am pretty excited about what this offense can do. I have their numbers coming down a little bit in terms of yards per play and some of their efficiency metrics that Achane helped boost them to last year. But overall, I think they're going to run a ton of plays. They're going to pass the ball a lot in the red zone. They're going to run the ball a lot in the red zone. They're going to be up there in touchdown lead for 2024. So I like the Dolphins quite a bit. And that's going to do it for me. Let me know what you guys think. This is my second video in the series. I'm open to thoughts, comments. Am I too off on my projections? Am I too low, too high? That kind of thing. I do want to kind of share with you guys where I have these guys in full PPR projections. I mentioned I had Tua at QB 13. I've got Achane at RB 12. And again, some of that bakes in his ability to stay healthy. I think he's any week that he's healthy, he's a running back 1. Because we know he can break off a 30, 40, 50-yard play at any given notice. And then Raheem Mostert, I'm a little bit low on. He came in at RB 30. And I think I need to get a more aggressive stance on this, but he's probably going to be a guy that's going to be a solid RB2 for you when he's healthy. I just don't know if I can trust him to be there come fantasy playoffs, November, December, that kind of thing. But I do like Mostert. I think he's a really good running back still. For receivers, I got Tyreek Hill at wide receiver 2. A good clear distance behind CeeDee Lamb this year. He's closer to Jamar Chase. So I think the question is Tyreek Hill wide receiver 2 or 3? He's in that conversation for me. And then Jaylen Waddle actually didn't grade out amazing for me. He's wide receiver 18. I think he's a really fun wide receiver 2. And man, if anything happens to Tyreek Hill, Jaylen Waddle's a top 5 wide receiver for that given week. So those are the 2 receivers you need to note. And then Jonnu Smith came out wide receiver or tight end 24. So, just a backup guy that's going to have a few spike weeks throughout the year. But like I was talking before, I think as I continue to do these, I'm going to get into a good groove and rhythm and be able to give all the information that I want to give for these projections. But any feedback would be greatly appreciated. If you guys are still watching at the end, I'm going to give you a coupon code. If you guys would like to be a Fantasy Fellowship member, I'll give you guys a coupon code. Just hit me up on Twitter, and I can give you guys a few dollars off of your monthly subscription. So let me know. Find me on Twitter, X at the fellow KGB. Thank you guys for your time. Leave a comment, like the video. It helps the channel grow, all that good stuff. And thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. Peace.